all, today I am in Palm Springs, California, and I have the opportunity to drive the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5. This gets a mid-cycle refresh for this model year, and they have changed some of the things that I did not like on this vehicle. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to do a quick walk around of the exterior and the interior. We'll see what's new. Then I'm going to dig into the things that I like and the things that I don't like. And I'll be honest, the things that I don't like have really shrunk. My name is Jill Ciminillo with Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. Let's take a closer look at the Hyundai Ioniq 5 right now. All right, starting with the exterior of the vehicle, the biggest changes you're going to notice are to the front fascia. It gets a little bit more angular, a little bit more pronounced, and you have a little bit more of an aggressive lower fascia right here. Now, that is just going to be one of the visible changes. As you go around to the side, you will also notice the wheel design gets a change as well. These are a little bit more aerodynamic and they look a little bit more EV-like. As you come around to the back and you look at this area here, you will see, there's a little bit more of some design elements on the cladding, and that is different from when the vehicle launched. And then as you come around to the back, you'll see that this is also a little bit more aggressive here from the backside with the lower fascia area on the back. Otherwise, this vehicle, frankly, looks remarkably similar on the exterior. Now, the biggest change that you're going to see on this vehicle is actually something you don't really see, but you see. And that is this right here. For 2025, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 gets the NACS charging standard, or the North American charging standard. This is the Tesla charging standard, which means that this vehicle can now charge at a Tesla supercharger. Now, the really interesting thing that Hyundai has done is, because they recognize that both CCS and NACS have a prolific charging network, they are providing every person who is buying a 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5, both, you have the NACS standard factory installed, first factory installed NACS system, by the way, in a non-Tesla vehicle. But yeah, you're going to get a CCS adapter as well. So yeah, best of both worlds if you opt for the Hyundai Ioniq 5 in the 2025 model year. Let's take a look at what's going on inside. Okay, from a design perspective, I'll be honest with you, it probably doesn't really look that different, because you still have this long piece of glass, you still have the two 12.3-inch displays, you still have the 4 pixels on the steering wheel that denotes that this is a Hyundai vehicle, because 4 pixels in Morse code is an H. So this is not going to look that different, but they have really made some significant changes here. And the first change that I can't show you while I'm filming video at the moment is going to be the fact that this has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So that was one of my biggest beefs that I had with the previous iteration is, yeah, you had this really cool system and the really neat glass, and yeah, you had to wire in your phone to access this. So for this model year, you now have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and they have moved the wireless charger right here. So easier access to your phone, and I will say this did not overheat my phone. So I think Hyundai is finally starting to move in the right direction with the wireless charger that actually works. Okay, outside of that, you will see that they have added physical buttons and dials for your most frequently touched functions. So your ability to seek, track, tune, get to your home screen, your map screen, these are physical buttons that you've got here, but you can also still physically do, the touch screen and the swipe function through the screen. So redundancies are now enacted, and they have cleaned up the HVAC controls a little bit more. So, you don't have to, previously I just felt like all of that was a little bit difficult and overdone in the original Ioniq 5, but they've cleaned this up. They've made it easier and more accessible so that you can push buttons, move dials. Now, the other thing that they have done is they have moved your like heated seat, heated steering wheel, and your camera, physical camera button right here to this part of the console. Again, physical buttons for your most frequently touched items. And yeah, I approve. I really approve of that. So that's just a quick look at some of the things that are new on the 2025 version. And I did forget to mention one thing when we were on the exterior, but I think you can see it from here. You now have a rear windshield wiper. Yep, previous iteration of this did not have that. It is now time for me to talk about the things that I like on the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5. And you know what? I'm just going to start with this right here. In case you missed it in the last shot, I have switched into the XRT trim, which is different than the vehicle that I did my initial walk around on, but you have a lot of the same features and technologies on both vehicles. So I feel pretty confident talking about the things that I like, even though it's not exactly the same vehicle that I started with. So yeah, let's start here. Because this is an up-level trim, you do have the blind view monitor. So essentially what that means is you turn on your blinker and you get a camera display in your behind the wheel gauges of what's going on in your blind spot. And living in a city, I really appreciate that because that helps me make sure that there's nobody in the bike lane if I'm getting ready to turn. And yeah, I like the extra set of eyes. Now, this is not to the exclusion of blind spot monitoring. This vehicle still has blind spot monitoring. I don't know if you can see a little triangle in the upper left-hand corner of the mirror. So you have both the blind view monitor and the blind spot monitoring. And I really like both of those things. So I very much appreciate the fact that you have wireless Apple CarPlay now. That was a pain point for me in the previous iteration of the Ioniq 5. You had this beautiful high-tech vehicle with all of this screenage, and then you had to wire in to access your CarPlay, and it just, to me, was a non sequitur. High-tech vehicle should have high-tech things in it, and that includes wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So I'm super glad that they have made that correction. I really like the infotainment system in the Ioniq 5. You know, this is very swipeable. It moves pretty quickly and it's pretty responsive. And I found that the Apple CarPlay also works really well. Google Maps and Apple Maps and all the things. So and it filled out the screen really well. So I'm sorry I can't show you that because if I use my phone and sync to the car, it cuts out my audio. So sorry I can't show you that. But just trust me when I say hallelujah, amen. It works really well, and I'm glad they've incorporated it into the vehicle. I also like the use of the physical buttons and dials. You know, I turned off the HVAC system, but you turn it on and you see it digitally lights up here. And even though these aren't physical buttons, I do think that they work really well, and they don't require a lot of eyes off the road time to operate them. And then you do have your physical buttons here for your map, your you know, audio controls. You've got your tune button, and you have your volume dial. So I've just, thank you. I feel heard finally that they have added back buttons and dials, because it just, when you're driving and you're trying to pay attention to the road, it's so hard to go tap, tap, tap to get to things in a screen. So thank you. And as we saw in the walk around, also you have your physical buttons here for your heated and cooled seats. This one doesn't have cooled seats, the limited trim did. But you have heated and cooled seats here, your heated steering wheel, and then your camera button. So yeah, let's talk about the camera button, because I also really like the camera angles. You have really good views going on, and so that, I'm in park right now, so it had brought up, you know, the side view so you can see what's going on. You still have the around view camera, but you can go through and you can select some different items here to kind of get an idea of what is going on. And I like the fact that I can just put my finger on here and move this around, and you can just see the different views and get a really good idea of what is happening. Now, obviously, when you put the vehicle into drive or reverse, you have some different things that pop up, but I like the dynamic guidelines that you've got on the camera, so that if you are moving your steering wheel, whether you're in reverse or drive, you can get a really good idea of where the vehicle will go just by turning your wheel. And yeah, we're not going to hit the pedestrian, I promise. So to that end, you know what? I'm just going to pop it back into park. What else do I like? This specific model doesn't have it, but on the limited trim we were looking at earlier, you had a digital camera mirror. So I like the availability of that tech feature. It makes it easier to see if you have people in the back seat. I also really like this right here, because you have the ability to store some things. Now, this isn't a really deep space, but I mean, probably the things you're going to want to hide, wallet, phone, whatever, will fit in there just fine. And I like the fact that you do have coverable space in addition to, you know, a wider space down here where you can set things, but that's going to be out in the open. But I need a covered space to be able to store some things. So I appreciate that. And then, yeah, we talked about this when we were looking at my driving position, the idea of having this floor space here to store a bag, a purse, eggs. I like to talk about buying eggs, and I don't want to put them in the trunk of the vehicle. I want to set them up front with me so they don't get crushed. That is a good place to put your eggs. Yeah, I'm just going to put that out there. You can put your eggs there. And they're very valuable right now, so you don't want them mashed. All right, I've moved into the back seat of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 to talk about the last thing that I really like about this vehicle, and that is going to be the generosity of the space. Now, here is a fun fact for you. The wheelbase of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 is actually about 4 inches longer than the large Hyundai Palisade. And what that means is, because this has an electric powertrain, it really maximizes the interior volume that you have available, which means your passenger space is very generous. So, as I mentioned, my driving partner was taller and bigger than me, and he had this seat kind of in a far back and tilted position, and yet, here I am. And I still have like probably about a foot between my knee and the back of this seat. Like, there is a lot of room back here. And I also have probably about 6 inches between my head and this roof, which kind of curves. So somebody who's on the taller side of things, like maybe not 6'9", but somebody who's on the taller side of things, so 6 foot, 6'1", probably going to fit back here very, very comfortably. These seats are supportive. The seat bottoms tip up a little bit, so you have some support underneath your knees. You have a generous amount of foot room. I'm just really impressed with how this space is. You've got big windows. You're not going to feel claustrophobic. I feel like small back here. This is generous space. You know, you do have this pull down here. You've got some cup holders, and yeah, you even have air vents right here. So there's just a lot of good stuff going on in this second row seat that's going to make this comfortable for your rear seat passengers. And yeah, I really like that. All right, it is now time for me to get into the things that I don't like on the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5. And I'll be honest with you, the big things that I didn't like have been corrected. The wireless Apple CarPlay, the charging pad that overheated your phone, the lack of a rear wiper, all of those things have been fixed for the 2025 model year. But there are still a couple of things that, once you fix some things, you notice other things that stand out. And the first thing that I'm going to point to is this right here. This is the gear shift. So it's on the column. That is not a new thing. Every time I talk about a column shifter on a vehicle, everybody's like, well, they did that back in the 50s, 60s, whatever. Yeah, this is not new. It's not new. But what annoys me about this shifter is, in order to put it into drive, you have to twist it that way. In order to put it into reverse, you twist it that way. And invariably, every time I got behind the wheel and I was trying to put it into drive, I went like that instead of like that. Now, I understand this is muscle memory. It is something that an owner would get used to, but there was just something about the motion of twisting it this way versus that way to put it into drive that just kind of messed with my brain a little bit. And I asked my drive partner, and he actually said the same thing. He had a similar problem. But again, this is something an owner would get used to. Now, I should point out that your wiper stock is up here and your column shifter is here. And this could also be something that gets a little bit confusing for a new Hyundai Ioniq driver, because you might start messing with this and then you turn on your windshield wipers instead of, grabbing this, or I don't know. But again, this is all muscle memory, and I'm really picking nits here. Muscle memory. Owners would get used to this stuff. Now, another thing that I have to point to that I don't like, even though I have a really good driving position, when we were driving the XRT model specifically in some mild off-road situations, I found that I couldn't necessarily see over the front end as much as I wanted to when we were kind of in, let's be honest, we didn't do any aggressive off-roading. But in some of the mild off-roading situations, there were some rocks on the road that I wanted to see, and it was hard to see that. So what I would do is I would hit the button, I would turn on the camera, but as soon as you got over about 5 miles per hour, your camera would shut off. That is not helpful to me. It is not helpful. I want the camera to stay on at higher speeds so that when I'm in an off-road situation and I'm worried about the rocks that I'm going to drive over, it would be very helpful to be able to see it on the camera and not have to slow down to 2 miles an hour. I know that they have camera screens that shut off because of distraction while driving, but I think they've pretty much disproven that that is a distraction. And I know that there are vehicles out there like General Motors trucks that allow these cameras to stay on at highway speeds. So there is no legal reason why these cameras can't stay on up to 10, 15, 20 miles per hour. I would find that very helpful, especially in the XRT trim in an off-road situation, as you're going 5 to 10 miles an hour and you're trying to avoid rocks in the road. I'm just going to put that out there. It'd be helpful in Chicago trying to avoid potholes. Just saying. Leave the cameras on at higher speeds. It's not distracting. It's actually helpful. All right, I have one more thing that I don't like on the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and I gotta grab the camera to show you that. While I generally like the materials that Hyundai has chosen in the Ioniq 5, I do have to say there is one little place I think that they need some improvement, and that is going to be in this area here with the black lacquer and this shiny black plastic. We were off-road. You can see the dust and the dirt that is just collected, people opening their windows. This is going to scratch. You're putting your phone in and out of here. You've got cups that you're going to be putting here. You're going to spill on this. I just think that they could have chosen a different material. And this is a small enough place that something else would do very well here. They could have even put something like this on there, and that would have been infinitely better. But an aluminum, like a scratch resistant metal surface or something, even a scratch resistant plastic would be fine in the space. Anything other than this shiny black stuff. Yeah, but really? If that's the worst, the gear shift, the camera, and the black lacquer, if that's the worst I can find on this vehicle, I think Hyundai did a really good job. Because I did manage to get my hands on an XRT trim, I figured I should probably do a quick walk around here before we jump into driving impressions, because there are going to be a few things that are a little bit different. And yes, this car is dirty because we actually did take it off-road a little bit. So, what is different? First, these recovery hooks. You've got these bright orange recovery hooks on the front, and I think they look great, but they're also functional, And I appreciate that. On any vehicle that is going to be having a little bit of an off-road focus, you've got to have recovery hooks. You've got to have recovery hooks. So I appreciate the fact that Hyundai did not ignore that. Now, the other thing that you are going to see that is going to be different on this is the extra cladding that you have surrounding the wheels and the front of the vehicle. So you have, it's kind of it's a pixelated design, but it's pixelated camouflage, and you see it over the wheels, you see it here on the front, you see it here on the sides, and then as you come around to the back, you also have, extra cladding kind of in this area here. And it just provides a little bit of extra protection for the vehicle when you are going to be in an off-road situation. You also have different wheels. These have, again, like a little bit of a pixel theme around the edges. They harken back to some Steely wheels, but they're not. They are alloy wheels, but they have, with this design, a little bit of a stronger structure, as well as, the cool pixelated design theme. So recovery hooks, extra cladding, and I will point out, you probably can't tell, but there is about an extra inch of ground clearance here. So no skid plates, no rear recovery hooks, but cladding, recovery hooks in the front, and a little extra ground clearance. All right, it is now time for me to do some very brief driving impressions, because here's the thing, I've really only been behind the wheel for a couple of hours. We had the opportunity to take the limited trim on road at the beginning. We drove the XRT off-road in the middle, and by off-road I mean just off pavement, and now we are currently driving the XRT back to the hotel. But overall, I have to tell you, my first impressions are very, very favorable. And as I alluded to at the very beginning, and as you probably saw in my likes and dislikes, they've corrected a lot of the things that I did not like on the Ioniq 5. So I've always thought this was a really good vehicle. It handles well. It's really quiet. You can play with the active sound to make it loud if you want to, but if you want the true experience, yeah, turn the sound off. That's what we did right now. Overall, it's just comfortable, fun to drive. If you need to accelerate and pass, it's got plenty of pep to do that. It's fun to drive. I don't know. I mean, if you're considering an EV, this is a very non-threatening EV to go with, because it has a lot of the things you're familiar with in Hyundai vehicles. It has buttons and dials now, and it has a lot of nice, clever functions and features. And then you compound that with the fact that it has nice ride and handling, and this is just a really good vehicle. Obviously, I picked some nits, and there's some things that I still don't like, but overall, this is a very, very likable vehicle, and it's an incredibly lovable electric vehicle. So if I were going to summarize this, it's really hard to do because there's so much to say, but if I were going to use one sentence, I would say the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5 is vastly improved over the 2024 model, and it still has all the things that you liked about the previous iteration. So that is what I'm going to say about that. Thanks for watching, and I will see you down the road.